It's time to step up, prep up.
Step up, prep up.
To help keep you free from the risk of HIV.
From the makers of Truvada, there's another PrEP option, Descovy for PrEP, a once-daily prescription medicine that helps lower the chances of getting HIV through sex. It's not for everyone. Descovy for PrEP has not been studied in people assigned female at birth. Talk to your doctor to find out if it's right for you.
Step up for health and body.
Prep up for your one and only love, or many loves. For kings, this queen, and you royals in between. For my now.
Our now.
And my future.
Our future.
Step up, prep up. Descovy is another way to prep. Descovy does not prevent other sexually transmitted infections, so it's important to use safer sex practices and get tested regularly. You must be HIV negative to take Descovy for PrEP, so you need to get tested for HIV immediately before and at least every 3 months while taking it. If you think you were exposed to HIV or have flu-like symptoms, tell your doctor right away. They may check to confirm you are still HIV negative. Serious side effects can occur, including kidney problems and kidney failure. Rare life-threatening side effects include a buildup of lactic acid and liver problems. The most common side effect was diarrhea. Tell your doctor about all the medicines and supplements you take, or if you have kidney or liver problems, including hepatitis. If you have hepatitis B, do not stop taking Descovy without talking to your doctor. Ask your doctor about your risk of HIV, and if Descovy for PrEP is right for you.
Words are loud, but actions are louder.
Step up.
Prep up.
With Descovy for PrEP.
Get help paying for Descovy for PrEP. Learn more at stepupprepup.com.
Hello, Unleashed LGBTQ. My name is Daniel Reynolds. I'm a senior editor with The Advocate, and I have the pleasure to be speaking with Brian Sims, who is a Democratic member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Brian, and welcome.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you to Unleashed for having me.
Yes, thank you to Unleashed. I know that we have a lot of ground to cover today, and you're also very busy as a politician, but I really want to ask, first off the bat, why do you love RuPaul's Drag Race?
The hard hitting questions first.
Yes.
I actually love Drag Race for lots of reasons, but I think first and foremost is that one of my favorite things about being LGBTQ is the sort of maybe the unabashed permission to enjoy this bright, vibrant mix of art and theater and music and queerness and openness. It just seems like this perfect queer soup of empowerment and acceptability.
Amazing. And I hear that you're a fan of the UK version as well. Are you rooting, or do you have are you a big fan of any of the contestants?
I will say that if a certain Scottish queen were to win, I would feel perfectly great about that. Although by the time this has aired, everyone will have known who has won, but I don't know yet. So yes, I'm rooting for a particular queen.
And why do you love the Scottish queen?
There is something about some of my favorite queens are not always necessarily glamour queens. She's a combination of sort of funny and powerful and exuberant, and that's what I'm looking for queens. I want big and over the top and exciting, and that's what I see.
I love that. And are these skills that you found to be useful in office as well?
No, although, listen, I can't carry a tune, so I'm probably more likely to lip sync a song than most. And maybe for some of my battles, I could have used some padding. And listen, if I'd have known better, I would have beat my face before we did this. But other than that, I can't think of anything that would cross over.
Well, we could all learn some lessons from Drag Race, certainly. And what I really love about you is that you are unafraid about showing this passion, right, for this queer show and this queer world while being an elected official. And, we see it in your social media where, in addition to, talking about politics and activism, you bring this queerness into your voice. And for you, what was it like refining that? And did you ever have any hesitancy at first about kind of de-gaying yourself, I guess? Because I'd imagine that those pressures exist within the political world, which is oftentimes a lot about conformity.
Yes is the quick answer. I have been affiliated with something called the National LGBTQ Victory Fund for most of my life. The Victory Fund is an organization based out of Washington, D.C. that helps to find, fund, and train out people for office. And long before I was out elected, I was a board member at the fund. And I remember myself giving advice to candidates about how to make sure that they were most palatable to the electorate when they were running, when you were putting yourself in ads, when you were sending out mailers, how to make sure that you did that in a way that amplified who you were, but didn't scare people away. And I remember several years later when I included my then boyfriend in a political ad, that it was quite a departure for people to see a queer person also including their partner. And it occurred to me that I am one of those people that has benefited massively from the elected officials that have come before me that were out, who got married, who had families. I think of Anise Parker and her wife and their children in Houston, and that helped me along to be able to sort of be as queer as I can be and choose to be. I oftentimes, maybe as a better answer to your question, I do think about this a lot. I especially did early on in my career when I ran in a state that didn't have any out elected officials. And there's this data point that the Victory Fund used to use, that no state that had ever passed any type of comprehensive relationship recognition laws for the queer community did it without first having an out legislator. And there's a lot of social science behind the optics of LGBTQ people and how that helps advance LGBTQ rights. There was a time when most Americans, the only queer people most Americans knew were Ellen DeGeneres, but Ellen was in their home every single day, and that did have an impact on people. So for me, I knew when I decided to run to become the first out legislator in the state that being gay was important, but also showing people, me, quote unquote, being gay, learning about the people that I'm dating and the places that I'm going to, and just sort of who I am in total seemed important to breaking down a lot of the barriers and the stigma that have both kept queer people out of office, but have also kept cis people from not supporting queer issues.
Right. But of course, that can also make you a target, right, to the opposition. I remember a few years ago, you sang The Little Mermaid, Part of Your World. It was kind of like a viral moment. It was really cute, but it was also weaponized by the right, kind of against you. And can you talk a little bit about that, the lesson you learned from that situation?
There's a couple of lessons, and I when I talk about the negativity that comes at me, and a lot of people are very aware of the negativity that I get from the light, I'll say the sort of lighter opposition, some really hardcore stuff, including a lot of death threats. It's really important to start this part of a conversation with the full-blown recognition that there is nothing that happens to me in a year, in a term, that is worse than oftentimes what happens to sort of say a trans Latina in South Side of Miami or in Allentown or in Erie. And so there's a part of this that's really important, I think, for people to have a little bit of perspective. And that, yeah, I've made myself a bit of a beacon for a lot of negativity. I am also somebody that doesn't shy away or back down from a lot of fights. And so that, that has caused a certain degree of negativity. I also push back heavily on gun rights. And there is this unique thing that happens when you push back against guns. People who want to threaten you or oppose you often do so referencing their guns. And so, yeah, part of this is, as a lot of queer people are used to, a lot of women, certainly people of color, we're sort of used to being the tip of the spear and with respect to a lot of battles, and also the face of the shield at the same time. And that's certainly something that I've seen in my career. But again, I sort of always come back to, no matter what's going on with me, it just isn't comparable to what's going on for most of the people for whom I'm actually, whose rights I'm fighting for.
Yeah. Why do you love The Little Mermaid?
Oh, why do I love The Little Mermaid? So I was, A Little Mermaid came out, I believe, in August of 1989. I had just turned 11 years old. And there was something about, that not only was it a right age, but I was also, I was a little queer boy as well. And this idea of being from a big, otherwise supporting, loving family and community, but still feeling like you're kind of on the outs, seeing that something else that might be great for you and questioning whether or not you have to give up who you are and all of your identity. And I don't know that I saw all of those corollaries when I was a kid. I just really, really liked the music and I liked the storyline. But as I've gotten older, it seems even more appropriate that film has, I don't know, it sort of touches on a lot of my my push for equality and my sort of drive as a queer person, it seems to check a lot of boxes for me.
I love that. And I actually thought of you when Meghan Markle referenced the film as being helpful to her in her recent interview with Oprah.
I got a lot of
helped her.
messages from people when that happened.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? That's amazing.
I sure did. And a couple of years ago, I heard from Jodie Benson, who is the voice of Ariel herself, and shot me this really nice note. And if you ever want to see me crumble, I was walking through the streets of Philadelphia with my boyfriend. We had just gotten cheesesteaks, very quintessential Philadelphia, and I get tagged in this video from her, and it was a game changer.
Wow. I saw her sing a few years ago at the Hollywood Bowl when they screened it, and it was definitely
she has kept her pipes.
She has kept the pipes, indeed. And of course, the story about finding your voice is a powerful one for me as well as a gay person. And also like the strength of Ariel's found family, right? She can't rely on her father, so she develops community around her to help her survive. And for you as a politician, what do you think is the power of being out and proud, and in terms of understanding those coalitions with other marginalized groups, communities?
Oh, that's actually two big questions in one. And I think the first part of it is something that a lot of our enemies don't necessarily know to cite, but it is the thing that makes them our enemies, and that's authenticity. Authenticity is something for the LGBTQ community, which is something that many of us have had to fight really hard for and really struggle for, to really know ourselves, to be the selves that we know. That level of authenticity is something that I wish on everybody, but is still relatively rare, and it's especially rare in politics. What I find is lots and lots and lots of the opposition that I receive is from not people necessarily who even don't like that I'm a gay person. They don't like that I'm comfortable being a gay person. And there's that level of authenticity that I see in so many LGBTQ people that is so foreign and so rare to politics. Like a lot of things, terrifies and scares those people. If you're an inauthentic, if you're a duplicitous elected official, seeing somebody be themselves, live their values, do the things they say that they will do, not be transactional in their approach to important issues and value-driven issues, that can be really terrifying for that person. And as we often know, people who have never really had to overcome anything, they don't know how to overcome anything. They mostly just know how to break things down.
Right. I think it was you who coined the term rainbow wave in 2018, where we saw this wave of LGBTQ people being elected to office. And I think that we are entering this era of the out politician, where we never had so many out people in elected offices right now. And I'm curious why you think that is, and why we're seeing this surge of visibility.
Sure. I have been often referring to it as the sort of the second coming of American representative democracy, sort of American democracy 2.0. And that is that our systems are designed to have allowed for all of us to become elected officials. They just existed at time periods where that wasn't allowed to happen. I don't believe often in Bolshevik revolutions. I don't want to burn everything to the ground and start over. And American democracy was the perfect example of that. This system was designed for the new us's, the island of misfit toys in many ways, to be represented and to hold position in elective office. We just weren't able to because of a lack of resources, a lack of money, because of discrimination. And so now what's happened is there are plenty of queer people around the country who have looked at their elected officials and thought, I could do better than they're doing. And they're right. And, I could spend days talking about how the social and political science tells us that people who have a history of overcoming things are much better at overcoming things. We oftentimes in American culture, we don't want to put a label on this type of competency because we somehow feel like it's going to take away from the white, straight, cis male majority and their competencies as well. And so we call it coded things. We talk about Black girl magic or women's intuition or wise Latinas or trans excellence. And those are all really coded ways of saying, if you have a life experience that has caused you to have to overcome marginalization, you're probably really good at overcoming marginalization. You're probably a good problem spotter and a good problem solver. You probably work really well in groups. And so, it's not a surprise to me that more LGBTQ people, more women, more people of color, and more second-generation immigrants have run for office in the last 2 cycles in America than at any time in US history. There has been so much broken and so much in need of a lot of the skill set that we see from marginalized Americans.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm curious, as a white man yourself, have you reckoned with the privilege that you already had, particularly in the wake of the Black Lives Matter uprising last year and the conversations that we're having now about dismantling systemic discrimination?
I try to do it in 2 ways. The first is a quick one. There was a gentleman who ran for city council in Philadelphia years ago named Adrian Rivera Reyes. And Adrian used to say, don't pretend to give a voice to the voiceless, give them a microphone. And so one of the ways that I try to is to amplify and lift up others' messages. But one of the really important answers, and perhaps it goes right to the first point of your question, that I'm also a white man, is that there is a ton of social science behind privilege that tells us that people who have a particular privilege are more likely to be successful challenging others' values within that privilege group. Here's what I mean by that. If you're a misogynistic, sexist man, you're already discounting the views and opinions of women. And so when a woman explains to you directly how your sexism and misogyny impacts her, you're already discounting it. But that same sexist man is going to give a pass to a man like you or me to be able to explain those same things, which means it's incumbent upon us to do it. If we're more likely to be successful challenging misogyny in other men, then it's our job to do it. Now, generally, it is stupid, it's foolish, it's wrong, it's cowardice to expect any group who is impacted by marginalization to also have to be the group that overcomes that marginalization. Telling people who are impacted by sexism that they also have to be responsible for ending sexism is ridiculous. But I hear this from white people all the time. Well, I'm not racist, what can I do? Well, you happen to have the most unique tool you could possibly have in combating other racists, and that is you look just like them. And so they might see you as a translator, but you can be a spy. And it's something that I wish upon all white people would really understand, that in this space of especially racial politics and racism, being a white person gives you one hell of a leg up to challenge and attack racism in other white people. So do it. And that is kind of true across most degrees of privilege within sort of privilege spectrums, whether it's access to resources, whether it's first and second generation immigrant status, whether it's LGBTQ status, although cis white gay men tend to mess up a lot of that data. But there is something that we always forget in racial and ethnic politics, especially, and that is that the people who are perpetuating racism are more likely to have that racism challenged by other people who look like them. So it's incumbent upon us to do it.
Yeah. What's that line? Don't just be an ally, be an accomplice.
Be an accomplice, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In addition to this kind of wave of LGBTQ politicians, I think we've really seen the power of the LGBTQ voter unleashed. And could you talk a little bit about that and how politicians either are or aren't realizing the value of our community support?
Well, so I think that depending on the politician, you will see lots of politicians that do fully recognize who we are as voters, because we're not a voting bloc, right? Part of the reason that the integrated rainbow is the symbol for our communities is because we are communities. But one of the things that I've begun to see is, in most states, especially close states, especially states like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the margin in places like North Carolina and Georgia falls very close to the margin of LGBTQ people that live in a lot of these states. It's not just that we have a reason to be politically engaged, because most of us don't have our rights in a lot of states, and that we are impacted by bad government. It's also that our numbers put us in a position to have really serious impacts on a lot of elections around us. So I say this to young people all the time. We still in this country have a very hard time getting young people to vote. A lot of them don't feel like that they can make a difference. And when I speak to young people, I always say, aren't you tired of being completely bombarded by political ads, by political asks? Well, none of those organizations are in the business of wasting their time or money. The reason they are bombarding young people is because if they do get engaged and they do vote, they will change virtually every election that they participate in if they participate in mass. So the same is true with us as LGBTQ people. Now, where I see my straight colleagues doing really well by the LGBTQ community is, is supporting policy for us. We're past the idea of straight elected officials who showed up at Pride, therefore they get our support, or have a gay cousin, therefore they get our support. Now, in order to earn our support, you have to work with us side by side with us in the battles for our equality. But we're seeing more of that than ever before. I think also people have begun to recognize the nuance of sort of what marginalization looks like for different people. The queer experience is not like the experience for people of color. I used to hear that when I was younger. Well, it's like being a woman, or it's like being an immigrant because we're all marginalized. But there's lots of lessons to be learned from marginalization that carry over, but the type of marginalization is simply not the same. And I think as we begin to learn more and more of those lessons, we actually become much better allies for one another.
Yeah, absolutely. What I thought was so interesting about the election last year were the Trump Pride rallies that were happening, and one of them actually happened in Pennsylvania, where we saw, a Republican president reaching out to, I wouldn't say LGBTQ, I would say gay specifically.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what your impression of that was, and that outreach that we've never seen before, and what you think that means in terms of the way conservatives perceive our community.
I, in advocacy, have had a fear for a long time that when we do finally gain some degree of legal LGBTQ equality, whether through the Equality Act, Fairness Act, that there is a subset of cis, white, gay men that would be Republican. Now, I don't know if that makes them, my family's Republican, so inherently I don't see that as necessarily bad, but depending on the type of Republican, there are some very terribly conservative, sexist, racist, homophobic, transphobic, white gay men in this world, especially some very powerful ones. And I think that continually needs to be and deserves to be called out. A lot of people use the marginalization against them to become experts in spotting it somewhere else, to combating it in other places, to helping other people. But there is a subset of the population that uses the marginalization against them to be experts at marginalizing others. People who see a hierarchy and think, if you're picking on me, well, if I pick on somebody below me, therefore I'm not at the bottom. And I do often see that from certainly not all gay or gay white men, but when I do see it in the LGBTQ plus communities, that's where I see it the most. And it needs to be pushed back upon. Those are oftentimes the same people that are pretending that they have an understanding of what sexism or racism are like, because they have also faced marginalization, and completely ignoring the fact that, again, those things aren't the same. You might learn some lessons that are similar, but unless you are directly learning about those others' experience, your own experience isn't going to teach you about them. And they need to be pushed back upon. I often find that they are some of the more fragile people within our communities, and that fragility is frankly a part of their aggression.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking about your own political career, you are considering running for lieutenant governor. Talk a little bit about why and what you would hope to accomplish in that position.
And I'm not even considering it. I am definitely doing it. I am. I will tell you, my calendar shows me that I am doing it. I announced in February that I am running for lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. So I just won my last re-election by one of the widest margins in state history, and I have. That was my fifth term. I'm serving currently in my fifth term. And I've spent a lot of time in my career wondering what I could do and would do with the experiences that I've gained in the legislature that I have now. And my current lieutenant governor is somebody that's pretty well known nationally. He's a guy named John Fetterman, 6'9". He's covered in tattoos, and he has a pretty well known reputation for not taking a lot of crap from people. But as Pennsylvania has sort of stepped on again to the national stage with respect to its politics, not just the last several years, but certainly around the last federal election, it became even clearer to me that I have spent my career asking people all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and all across the country for support. And I've received that support and I've learned a lot from it. And now that my lieutenant governor has announced that he's running for the US Senate, I both believe that I've got an opportunity to take, every single progressive issue that I have worked on for the last decade: women's rights, reproductive rights, racial and ethnic justice, LGBTQ plus civil rights, the rights of labor, the rights of children, the rights of immigrants. There's so many issues, the environment. There's so many issues that I have spent my career working on that need and deserve the spotlight and the power that the lieutenant governor can bring to them. And also there's a role that the lieutenant governor has in overseeing the Senate. And if anybody knows anything about the Pennsylvania Senate, it is unfortunately that it needs adults in the room. And I think that my experience serving as a legislator for the last 10 years in the House would really give me a leg up in helping to control that room and babysit that room.
Yeah, I think a lot of people saw that in the presidential election, really that tension between the different political parties in the Pennsylvania State Senate. But could you talk a little bit more about the challenges of dealing with people that basically stonewall you from the other side of the aisle?
Sure. It's one of the really complicated things that I've had to learn with dealing with my Republican colleagues is that I believe a majority of them support my equality, even though 100% of them vote against it. And that's something that intellectualizing and it was something that I've really struggled with over the years. Can I like a person who believes in my equality, but when given the opportunity to support that equality, will not? And the quick answer is I still don't know. I'm not in the legislature to have friends or to make friends. And I don't want to sound like a reality TV show contestant when I say that, right? I know it always sounds right. It sounds like I'm on Survivor, but truly, there's not a single colleague I have that can ever vote for me. If they were constituents, they wouldn't be able to be in office, or whom I'll ever be able to vote for. What we can do is support each other's issues. It's the only thing that we can do for one another. And there's no amount of liking me personally or thinking that that my family should be accepted that makes up for not voting to do that when given the opportunity. And so I do struggle with that a lot. But I also, if I were just a citizen, I could struggle with that all I needed to and all I want to do. And I could be pissed off about it, but I'm not. I'm quite literally paid by my constituents to do something, even in the terrible environment that I go to work in. And so, I'll give you a really good example. Is just a couple of days ago, my legislature passed a bill that functionally criminalizes HIV/AIDS status and hepatitis B status, something that we used to see in the 80s and 90s. And I fought it tooth and nail on the House floor, explained in detail why it was so bad. And yeah, I got a couple extra Democrats to vote against it, but the bill passed. And I was pretty furious about it. But the next day, early in the morning, I ran into the Republican sponsor of the bill. Now, I'm lucky in that he's a relatively new Republican, so he doesn't even know that he's supposed to go along with his party all the time per them. And so we started talking, and he said, I didn't intend to attack people with HIV or people with hepatitis. This bill had been around for years and years and years. I just looked back and found the last version of it that somebody had introduced. That language was in there. Some Democrats had voted for it before. So I just thought it was the right language. He goes, by the time this issue was raised, it was too late to change it. But if you guys can find a way to change this bill, maybe over in the Senate, I'll support that. And he did. I found him later on the House floor. I let him know that the Fraternal Order of Police, a group that I don't often work with, were going to support my view of this bill, that this language needed to be stripped out. And it's all happening right now. When we go back into the session next week, the Senate is in on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'm going to walk over and have a conversation with a senator that chairs a really important committee. And this is all going to presumably, hopefully go pretty well. Now, again, it doesn't mean that we all want to have beers with each other afterward. And it doesn't mean we're all kind of going back to our staff and patting each other on the back for a bipartisan thing that we were able to work together. We made a very bad bill a little less hateful. And that's important to know.
Wow. I think it's a great message of hope to hear right now too, that, conversation,
Still works a little
in politics. Yeah.
Yeah. This guy got down on the ground and was wrestling with my dog and looked up and said, "Hey, about yesterday's bill." And that's how the conversation started.
Wow. We'll never underestimate the power of dogs.
I promise I don't.
Other than lieutenant governor, do you have higher political ambitions? Would you consider Higher offices?
It's funny. As long as I have been in government, people have always asked me about higher offices, and part it's because we all can. It's kind of easy to, if we've had any civics education, most people can kind of see the path from rep to senate to da 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 da. Whereas we can't. Most of us don't know that about each other's companies. If I knew most of my friends' company hierarchy, I'd ask them, "Do you want to be a division head of this or whatever?" I am fond of telling people that when the first gay president gets elected, I'll have helped get her elected, but it won't be me. I did not, I didn't have an interest in running for the state house until it became very clear that my experience combined with what was missing in the House of Representatives could make this successful, and I feel like it has. And that's how I feel about the lieutenant governor. I'm not prepping for a governor's race in 8 years or something beyond that. I very much, I think I serve myself and I serve the constituents that I work for really well by both doing the job I'm in right now to the best of my abilities, which I think I am, and in this case, knowing that if I become the lieutenant governor, that I could take this work and do it on a large scale for the entire state. But that's it.
Well, I wish you all the best in your pursuits for serving your constituents and just preaching the message. And before we sign off, I'm wondering if you could share some advice to the people watching about how they can use their voice in order to enact positive change within the political system as citizens.
I'm happy to. There's actually two things that I think most people don't realize about advocacy and activism that if they did would make them do more of it. The first is how you speak. A lot of people think that in order to be an effective activist or an effective advocate, you need to speak powerfully or slowly or clearly or unambiguously. And while that's nice, and some people do speak that way, the vast majority of us don't. And if that's what was necessary in order to change somebody's mind, we would never change anybody's mind. It turns out that very sort of slow, melodic, easy voice to listen to is also easy to forget. It's easy to hear. It kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But when we talk to people the way that we talk to each other, ums and uhs and audibleized pauses and run-on sentences and dependent clauses and all the ways that we normally talk, the people that we're talking to, your brain has to kind of lean in a little bit to listen to it, but it's more likely to hear what you're saying and remember what you're saying. And so the first tool is just talk the way that you talk. And you're going to do a better job of conveying your message than trying to give anything rehearsed. The second is speak in the first person. Every one of us knows how to pass along a story of somebody that's been impacted or talk about a person that was hurt by something or gained from something. But it turns out that speaking in the first person is always the most effective tool as an advocate. Telling a person across from you or people across from you how you are impacted by something is really hard to argue with. And this isn't like saying, it's my belief or I feel this way. It's not that. It's everybody is an expert in one thing, and we're all an expert at least one thing. And that one thing is your own experiences. And if that is the purpose of your advocacy, to convey an experience, convey your own. So speak in the voice that you normally would, and make sure that you're talking about your own experiences. And you're going to be a very, very effective advocate. I see people every day, dozens of people every day that come in to lobby me or to advocate to me. And those two things have proven true both in my own advocacy and in everybody that comes before me. The people that I remember the most are the people that speak directly, that speak in the first person, and talk to me the way that they would talk to their friends.
Yeah, and this is true for journalism as well. I mean, we can report on different studies that illustrate different disparities, but when you share your story with someone in the media, you can really make others understand and hopefully share empathy for the situation that's happening.
No question.
Yeah, well, I have enjoyed our conversation. But before we go, is there anyone from the original RuPaul's Drag Race that you'd like to throw your support behind as a candidate for the crown?
Yeah, I am a big Gottmik fan. When this season started, and I knew that Gottmik was knew how to paint a face and was a fashion queen, no question. But to see her excel in the Snatch Game, to see her excel on stage, and how she moves, and to see her makeup, to see the sort of broad range of her makeup. I'm a big Gottmik fan. Simone, style for days, but I think Gottmik is my choice this year.
Beautiful. Well, wishing Gottmik and you all the best, and take care.
Thank you, Daniel. And again, thank you, Unleashed.
Yes, thank you, Unleashed. Bye-bye.